Councillors to please come to the table. Take a seat. He did not spill that cup of tea. Excellent. I will kick us off with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, he hiaki ana te ātākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. I declare the meeting open. Welcome everyone. Please let me or at you know if you intend on leaving the meeting. But when it comes to apologies, we have one from Councillor Chung for lateness. Councillor Randall is here, and Councillor O'Neill for partial absence as well. So I will move the motion. We also have Councillor Panovich for late. Leaving at 11. Early departure. You're second. Take that to a vote. And that is passed. Announcements by the Mayor. I will reserve my comments and say some words at the end of the meeting. Conflict of interest declarations. Do we have any? No. Confirmation of minutes. I move the motion to approve the minutes from the 25th of October. Do I have a seconded, Deputy Mayor? Let's put that to a vote. Councillor Pena, cool. That is passed, thank you. 1.6, all items are on the agenda. 1.7, we have one person for public participation. I would like to welcome Tiana on behalf of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty team to speak to item 2.2. You have 10 minutes, which also includes questions. She's online.
Thank you. Tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou ngā Kaunihera o Pōneke. He uri ahau no Ngāti Kahungunu ki te Wairo, no te whakatōhia no Ngai Tūhoi, ko Tiana tōku ingoa. My name is Tiana and I come from the east coast of Aotearoa, New Zealand, but have called Wellington home for the last 7 years. I come here today alongside my co-lead Mary Moyonokolio Ngā Hāmoa. We are here on behalf of a collective of climate activists mobilising across Aotearoa, calling for local and national government leaders to endorse the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, a treaty that is growing in global support with 12 nations backing the call, as well as over 90 cities, including Sydney, Barcelona, Toronto, Los Angeles, Vancouver, and London, to name a few. Wellington Council have been vocal champions about the need to urgently and appropriately address the climate crisis, evident in Wellington's recognition by the Carbon Disclosure Project as one of the 122 cities across the globe that is taking bold leadership on environmental action and transparency. In 2019, Wellington City Council declared the climate emergency, recognising the urgency in which we need to respond to this crisis. We are once again asking our city leaders to exemplify the climate leadership we're often proud to speak of by being the first major city in New Zealand to join the global call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation, or to end the fossil fuel era. By joining the call to endorse the Global Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. This treaty has 3 pillars: non-proliferation, ending new coal, oil and gas exploration and expansion, a fair phase-out, equitably phasing out existing fuel production and stockpiles in line with the 1.5 pathway, and a just transition to increase renewable energy access and to ensure no community, city, country or worker is left behind.
Talofa lava tēnā tātou ko Mirama ono ko Leo toku ingoa. I hail from the villages of Whalewha, Te Awea, Malia and Nauvaa, and have proudly called Wellington home since 2016. Cities play a critical role in leading climate action, which we have frequently seen in Wellington's response to the climate crisis and clear commitment to reducing emissions. City endorsements help to build momentum and apply the required pressure to phase out fossil fuels and equitably transition to renewable energy. Both the International Energy Agency and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change clearly state that there is no room left for new fossil fuels if we are to meet the 1.5 climate goal. Phasing out fossil fuels is feasible since there is enough renewable energy potential in every region of the world to deliver energy access for all. There is no disputing that fossil fuels are the single greatest contributor to climate change and undercut progress towards meeting every single sustainable development goal, from threatening global peace and security, damaging health, water, air, and especially continuing to drive the climate crisis. For many years, nuclear weapons were seen to be the greatest threat to humanity. Today, fossil fuels present that same level of threat and are the weapons of mass destruction which we must stop. 50 years ago, New Zealand was one of the first signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to avoid nuclear war and exemplified the moral courage then that we need now. Just as nuclear-free cities built the momentum for the Nuclear-Free Treaty government endorsement, we are seeing similar momentum for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty by getting cities endorsements, and would love for Wellington City Council to be the first major city in Aotearoa to do so. While the Paris Agreement begins to limit emissions, it includes very few mechanisms to stop or slow the production of fossil fuels. In fact, it doesn't actually mention coal, oil, or gas in its contents, which is why we need a global plan to end the production of fossil fuels and fast-track solutions. On a personal note, Tiana and I have just returned from COP28, hence the Lost Voice, where we've seen Pacific leaders, including Australia and New Zealand, who have made strong calls for an equitable phase-out of fossil fuels. For me and my family in Samoa and across the Pacific, the phase-out of fossil fuels and an equitable transition to renewable energy is a matter of life and death. The science is clear. If we do not act now, whole islands like mine will cease to exist. We call you to action. Join the growing global call for a treaty to manage a fast, fair, and forever phase-out of fossil fuels to protect our communities today and the generations to come. Whakatai.
Open to any questions if there are any.
Cool. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you for your important work and your moral call. Can I just check that you are equally or even more concerned about the ecological crisis along with the climate crisis?
Kia ora, yes. Indigenous peoples make up 5% of the global population, yet we protect over 80% of the world's biodiversity. That is equally part of the mahi that we do. This is just the pillar that we're bringing to Council today.
I'm not seeing further questions, so I'd like to thank Tiana and Mary for your time and, of course, your important mahi on this kaupapa. Kia ora. Next item, Councillor Winera, I believe you have a request to make.
I do. With reference to the relevant standing order, could I please be allowed to make a personal explanation to the meeting?
So granted.
Great. Kia ora, everyone. I'm just going to rise and make a brief report back on my experience at the local government New Zealand Young Elected Members Conference, which I attended a couple of weeks back, 1 week back, and just wanted to pass on what I got out of it and some things that I learned. So it was a couple of days. We were hosted up in the far north. We got to see quite a length and breadth of it. The far north is an incredibly diverse district. You've got very small rural townships and some more urbanised city centres, and a single unified council for the whole region. I believe it's the second largest by area, yet one of the smallest by population in the country. So they have some very unique challenges, which are in some ways very different to what we experience here in the city, and in some ways quite similar. So I guess for me, the thing that took me the most by surprise is how similar the problems that we are facing are to those that can be found in other local government areas in the country. Not just from territorial authorities as well, but from regional councils, from district councils, you name it. Community boards, you know, there are some common themes ringing throughout the sector, and I'm sure anyone who went to the local government conference down south can attest to this, but people who are looking down the barrel of aging infrastructure, looking down the barrel of 20-30% rates rises, people who are looking at options related to sale of assets in order to either pay down debt or to create funds to insure themselves against future financial shocks. It's all the same stuff, and it really gave me the gift of perspective to hear it in so many different flavours from Cape to Bluff. So I would encourage everyone on another note to really experience the Waitangi Treaty Grounds. That was a big part of our stay. We were up there for 2 days. I'd actually never been before, believe it or not. And it was, I know, it was a beautiful place. I know, dangerous to admit that on a live stream meeting, but I'd never been. And so I've now been. Yeah, it really is the birthplace of our country, if not our nation. So it's a really important place to check out. And it's even more fun when you're sitting there getting workshops on local government for a couple of days. So yeah, just wanted to offer a big mihi for sending me, and I got a lot out of it. And yeah, I thank you all for your attention. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you for that report back. Any questions? No. In that case, we will move to 2.1, funding for Wellington Water. Siobhan will introduce the paper.
Morena Council. So this paper has been put together in response to a request from councillors for officers to investigate options to provide further funding to Wellington Water to assist with fixing leaks during the acute water shortage. So this came about after Wellington Water presented their long-term plan investment advice a few weeks ago, and we have looked at that. We've talked to Wellington Water. They've indicated that they could utilise an additional $2 million in funding this financial year. And there are some options presented in the paper. The only realistic option to fund this would be to fund this OPEX through debt, noting that it would cost ratepayers an additional $670,000 over the next 10 years to do that. Everything else is in the paper. I'll take it as read. We have Tonya Haskell, Chief Executive Wellington Water, with us too, should you want to ask Wellington Water or ourselves any questions.
Yes, Councillor Brown. Oh, just Mike, sorry. Oh, these are just questions. So we'll put your motion up just after I've introduced the paper, after I've moved the paper. Do we have any questions? Yes, Councillor Pennant.
Thanks for your response. So, and to my question, if it was me, how many leaks could we fix for $2 million? So that's 800. What sort of proportion is that? Is there any understanding at all?
Proportion of what, total leaks?
Of how many leaks, yeah. Because it's a bit hard to put that, if there's 20,000.
We do have that. I'm going to ask, oh, we've got Tim. Will you be able to answer that, Tim? We will, yes, please. We would be able to. I just haven't got the charts with me.
Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, this is Tim Harty, and he is the Acting Customer Operations General Manager.
Morning, Morning. So at the moment, there's about 1,500 open leaks in Wellington City, and we're forecasting 2,500 by the end of the financial year. So this will fix about 800, as been indicated, and bring us down to about 1,700 at the end of the financial year.
Okay. And what's the consequence for you if you have to wait a few more months for the money?
So at the moment, we're trying to mobilise the extra resources. If councillors recall, when we came and talked about the LTP, we indicated that we'd been moving subcontractors out of Wellington City because of the funding challenges for us. So if we have to wait longer, it'll be more difficult to secure the resources to do the work. We have got some earmarked, and we can get them engaged by the end of the calendar year to come in the new year. But we wait longer, they do need to go and continue working in other places.
Okay. And the last question, Tonya, it's a bit of a struggle to kind of repeated requests for money, and debt funding is not ideal. So from your point of view, why was this not put in earlier, given we know there's lots of leaks, just so that we can look at the funding package properly?
Well, you'll recall that we asked for more money from the council as part of our annual planning process, and council made an affordability assessment in that process, and this was an offer of funding from Wellington City. It wasn't something we asked for, so we're really grateful for that.
So have you got any other funding gaps?
Many.
Right.
I think you would have seen them all in the LTP.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I had to miss
up.
the briefing because I had another council meeting, but okay, thanks for that. That's enough for now.
Councillor McNulty.
Probably 2 rounds. Just firstly, in terms of this needing to be funded by debt, I noticed in the LTP we're looking at the roading budget, I think going from 60 kilometres to 40 kilometres. So would that, if that's correct, would that suggest that we might be overspending in the current FY on our roading maintenance?
No, the LTP proposed budget at the moment anticipates actually pushing renewals out. So in terms of the optimal renewals, it would be at that 60k. We're saying it's 75% of that, so at 40.
Okay. When was so I know that I saw in Tonya's updates that there was the sort of switch to there's extra capacity from there's been no capacity. So when did Wellington Water first actually come and talk to council and say we can do more works in the reactive space?
So the genesis of this was at the LTP presentation, which was given a couple of weeks ago, and there was a question from Councillor Calvert about if we provided you more funding, could you do more work?
Cool. And I guess these next 2 are actually for Wellington Water. I could come back if there's others and ask them together.
Okay. Councillor Free.
We've got, one of my colleagues has done a bit of analysis on this, and there apparently is some millions still unspent at this point in time. How, in the order of maybe, 5 or 6 million. How long would it take you to spend that to get to where we actually haven't got any funding? At what rate are you fixing leaks at the moment?
So at the moment, we're balancing our budget to our resources. So as I indicated, we've pulled out all our subcontractors out of Wellington City and are just using internal resources to fix leaks. So we just balance that with the funding we have available and go as fast or as slow as we can. So that gets impacted by major events. So if we have a major event, we fix less leaks, and we just need to pull and move our crews around to make sure that we hit the end of the financial year on budget is our absolute focus.
So I guess I'm asking, I know not all leaks are the same, but in a week, how many leaks would you be able to fix? In a month, how many would you be likely to fix, going on your current track record?
So we're doing about 6 to 8 a day at this current moment in time.
And your estimate is 800 for 2 million. So I'm just trying to do a little bit of an understanding of how this is playing out at the current time and how it might play out with extra funding.
Our average cost for each for repairing a leak and with 2 million is about 800 leaks.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman. Wonderful. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. So just with, you'll see there's a couple of amendments. So is that something that Wellington Water is able to ensure, just in terms of that we get the data and the information that our officers need? So it's just about the reporting that's required. So are you able, do you feel that you're in a position to be able to provide us that reporting?
Yes, so in terms of this particular tranche of funding, we'll be subcontracting that out and we'll be able to provide that reporting on a monthly basis.
Okay, thank you. And just one other question. You've mentioned in the past that you fix a leak in one part of the pipe and then maybe a few meters down, because you've fixed the pressure there, you have another leak. So that's still going to happen until we do the renewals?
Correct.
And I've got one more question for officers. One of the things we got from Wellington Water was also advice on if we could provide some more capital, they could do some more capital renewals work for Wellington Water, and just wondering where that is at.
We never had that request come to us.
Because that information was sent from Wellington Water to us.
We were never directed to look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
So I just want to check this point, because it's going to be made that we shouldn't look at this request, and I want to check if it started with Wellington Water, if you agree with it. So we've been told that we've committed about $50.5 million for operating costs in this financial year, and in that 50.5, approximately 10 million is for reactive maintenance, and 6 million of that was unspent as of November. Does that line up with what you have?
So we have 6 million in our reactive water maintenance bucket at the moment to fund our crews and our work through to the end of the financial year, so that we, as I mentioned before, so we land on budget.
Okay, so you're phased. It's not that you are behind in terms of it's phased over that 12 months and you are where you would expect to be at this point in time?
Absolutely. I think we're almost on the button of the percentage we should be through the financial year as of the end of November.
Okay. And the last question, why are we going backwards in terms of the reactive leak repairs? What's the major network cause?
The asset condition.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, just quickly going back through my emails where I did request both CapEx and OpEx for the water infrastructure. So if, obviously that's been missed out about the CapEx, so can we then now look at, we're dealing with the OpEx now, can we look back, can we look now to February and have a paper then brought to us about the CapEx opportunities for the rest of the financial year?
Oh, that would be a decision for the council as a whole if they wanted that advice?
Yeah, because I mean, we obviously asked this informally, so we've got the paper through now, and as part of that request was also CapEx, not just OpEx.
The work that we did with the Mayor's office was to provide a paper on the leaks.
Right.
That was what we were asked to do.
Okay.
Councillor Calvert, I can take this offline with the ELT and we'll see what we can do. Councillor Free.
Yeah, I'm just following up on the question about the ongoing leaks. And do you have any information as to how many new leaks are related to similar area where you fixed leaks, and how many just spring up independently as a fresh leak? Because I'm wondering if we're just chasing our tails, actually fixing things, and we need to focus on renewals.
Look, certainly focus on renewals will reduce the amount of reactive leaks, there's no doubt about that. And we do tend to go back to assets that we've repaired and that they've failed in the vicinity of the same or the last repair. That does happen, just due to the condition of the asset. Hopefully that answers the question.
It sort of does, but I'd actually be interested to know the quantum of that, if you have any data. Like, is this actually a hopeless exercise to just spot fix leaks, because you're just actually creating new leaks? And this would be actually not money spent wisely. We'd be better to put this money into renewals.
No, it's a really good question, and it does feel like you're chasing your tail at the moment, and we are to an extent. The fixing leaks doesn't cause the leaks, so we are talking about, in some cases, 100-year-old pipe in places like Arrow Street, or they're asbestos cement and it's come to the end of its asset life. So a pipe that's prone to breaking in one place is prone to breaking in another. However, when we're facing a summer where we are looking at the amount we can supply, getting really close to the amount that is consumed or lost through leaks, then every bit helps. And every leak we fix will help with that ability to survive the summer. So it is quite critical work. We can't not do one in order to do the other. And the advice that have given since the Water Summit and in the LTPs is that we need to do both. We need to do all of the above.
That being the case, why wouldn't you be urgently getting the crews down, regardless of whether we're giving you an extra $2 million or not, and be spending the $6 million to get everything fixed, at the critical time, which is coming up to the summer period?
So that is a workforce management thing. We employ people, and we employ people on a permanent basis, and it's important that they have work to do throughout the year. So our drainage crews and our water reticulation crews, we pace their work so that they are constantly work. That also drives efficiency. So we are getting people to do, manage a weekly workload. It's done safely. It's planned to the extent we can. But we're not able to give surge capacity, except for situations like this where Tim set up a special project and we're doing it slightly differently. It's important that we maintain that ability to react throughout the year. And you'd have seen from my end of the week messages at the last week, a lot of them you have to respond immediately. So you can't have people stood down for that. We need to have people ready. Most of our work is actually responding to P1s where people have lost service, or there's been something, there's a dramatic break that's interrupting traffic, like in Arville Street. So, yeah.
Okay.
Apologies, Councillor. We'll have to move on to the rest of the list. Councillor Wineta.
Kia ora, just something of a procedural question. Is point 2 of the motion replaced by point 5? Am I understanding that correctly? Or is point 5 in addition to?
It's an addition.
In addition? Okay.
It's
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Two last ones. One of the frustrations in terms of repairs locally is certainly, let's say you've had a medium leak fix and there is a low in the immediate vicinity. We're talking 2 or 3 metres away, and the crews come out and do the medium leak and leak the low, or a high priority leak with a medium. Is there any delegation that can be given in this project so that you can actually give contractors and say, look, if you are out there and the resource is being spent and there is something that's on the radar that is immediately next door, because I would assume there would be financial and operational efficiencies in doing that. So is that something you've looked at?
So this particular tranche of funding will be directed at doing works in an area. So that's exactly how it will operate. We'll package up 20 leaks in a particular suburb. They'll go in, have an overarching traffic management plan and do all the works that are in that particular vicinity, and then come back out. So we'll be able to operate efficiently in that manner, because the crews that will be assigned to this work aren't going to be disrupted by priority 1 works. They'll be able to just go in and focus on doing these priority 3 leaks, repairing those and working methodically through things. So they won't get that phone call that says drop tools and race off to the next job because we've got a P1 down the road.
Cool. And last one, can you just spell out again what level 4 restrictions at their worst would look like for Wellingtonians?
Level 4 restrictions are no outdoor water use at all, which is actually what level 3 is. So that's no car washing, no watering the garden, and indoor use is restricted. So we'd ask people to I keep going to, if it's brown, flush it down, if it's yellow, let it mellow. Making sure you use a full load of washing, make sure you don't run the tap when you are doing your teeth, have a short shower, all those kind of activities. So we're asking people to really try and get down to around 40 litres per person per day, which is quite tight.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any further questions. So thank you, officers. Thank you, Tonya and team from Wellington Water. Really appreciate the explanations. Okay, so I am going to move the paper. Thank you, officers, for putting this together in that short time frame. I think the warnings of water shortage has been alarming for many of us, and we want to make sure we're doing everything we can in our power to help with this issue. The advice we have is that Wellington Water does have the capacity to fix more leaks if we can release additional funding. If fixing a few hundred leaks will help lessen the impact of water shortages, then many of us support that. I know there were genuine concerns about reporting and value for money and such, but that's why we've put a couple of amendments up here in red. A reminder that we do still invest $110 million in Wellington Water each year, but we acknowledge that the Wellington water shortage over the summer is serious. So my expectation is that Wellington Water will do what it can and use this additional money to fix as many leaks as possible, as urgently as possible. Councillor McNulty, you'd like to second?
I'll second, but I'll reserve my right.
Fabulous. Councillor Brown, I'll hand over to you for what you'd like to do.
I'm being advised here by Tien that I would like a procedural motion to lay the item on the table to the next council meeting, and I'd like to actually talk to why I'd like us to postpone the decision on this. So is that all right? As we've just heard, we allocated $50.5 million to the operating costs of Wellington Water for this financial year. Remember that we're 5 months through the 12 months of the financial year. Of that $50.5 million, roughly $10 million of it was to be allocated to reactive maintenance, i.e. fixing the leaks. And of that, about $6 million is unspent. So the sort of argument that somehow or other more money today is going to make any difference to the work that's actually completed over the next couple of months is frankly risible. And I would really wonder about any business which is running itself in such a way that if it sees there is a urgent problem, that it wouldn't actually spend $10 million, which has actually been allocated. And had the question come to us later in the year, and they'd said, okay, we've spent the money and we've still got work to do, fine. But the reality is we have allocated them 10, they want it bumped up to 12, or at least we've offered them the extra money. This money, if we were to make the decision today versus postponing it to the next council meeting, it's not going to make any difference at all to the amount of work that is done over the next couple of months. I know that people are concerned about the possibility of water shortages over that period of time. The spend, if we allocate it today, is going to make zero difference. We've got a bigger picture, which is very important. The people of Wellington clearly do want us to fix the pipes. There's no doubt about that. The challenge for us is to deliver that at an affordable level. And Wellington Water itself, as you know, has put forward a proposition across the regions that it would spend up to $7.6 billion over the next decade on improving the water system, but it's identified that the affordability level is actually only 2.8. So they themselves have identified that there is a significant gap between what they would like to be able to spend and what is actually affordable. So we have got to be very cognizant of the affordability of the spend. We're looking at a 14% rate increase next year. And I think that we've got to be very focused on making sure we're achieving value for money. Just so you know, last year, our three water spend for the council, or our three water cost, was $286.6 million. So it's by far the largest spend that the council incurs. Of that was funded $127 million with rates, $159 million worth of additional debt. So last year, the ratepayers of Wellington saw that on average $1,600 per ratepayer paying for three waters, and we incurred $2,000 of debt per ratepayer for the three waters. So it's a very big issue, and we should not be casual about spending sort of ad hoc amounts, if you like. We have a real problem with our relationship with Wellington Water. We have a major lack of visibility. We do not have any certainty about their discipline in terms of the financial management of their contractors. Now, I realise that what we are being told here today in the amendment is that there would be greater transparency around the $1 million we'd allocate. What about the $50 million we've already allocated?
Final points, thanks, Councillor.
In January, a number of very important steps are going to occur. There is going to be a letter of expectations letter that we and the other regional councils who are members of the Wellington Water Consortium are going to be putting forward our letter of expectation. I think it would be a very bad messaging for us today if we weren't staunch about the need for changes and we weren't saying we're not going to just sort of ad hoc provide additional funding, and that letter of expectation could really change the whole game for us and our relationship with Wellington Water. And there's the Regional Mayoral Forum to discuss the whole water picture. So in both cases, I would like us to send a clear message that we're willing to provide additional funds to fix the leaks, but that we can see benefits in waiting until the next council meeting when both of those things, the letter of expectation and the mayoral forum, will have occurred. So that's why I would like us to actually postpone this decision until the next council meeting, when nothing will have changed between now and then, except we will be in a much better position to be confident that we're progressing with a value for money proposition.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Free, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right.
Councillor Randall.
I have a question for officers.
We've received advice we can debate this procedural motion.
So I have a question for officers.
Yes.
Or two questions, actually.
Yep.
The first question is, when is the next council meeting?
Good question.
Look at your diary.
Okay, it's the 7th of March.
7th of March.
Okay. The second question is really asking Wellington Water what the impact of delaying providing this funding would be until the 7th of March.
The resources would have gone that we're engaging to do the work.
So I mean, you're saying that to do work in, say, May or June next year, you need to book the resources in advance.
So we've got the resources lined up as far as we can to come on board as soon as they possibly can in the new calendar year, to do this work. So that particular set of resources will have to go somewhere else because it's a business. It would need to go and work somewhere else. So would I have to try and find some other resources and bring them on board? So we just have to work and see what we can do from that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Can we just get some clarification on the standing order? Because I'm just looking at it, and I might not be interpreting correctly, and I understand our expert Jen Parker's here.
Yep.
But I really want to understand is how does under 25 can we move to 25.4? Which is procedural motions to be taken immediately.
Yep, we'll just.
There's no debate between now and then.
Okay, so there's
the
no.
officer could ask a question of, I mean, that's.
Okay, but there's no debate.
There's no debate.
No, thank you. That's what. Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you for that clarification. So there is no debate. Can Councillor Free
ask a question? Yeah, you can ask a question if you want, but the seconder can speak.
But the seconder can speak if she would like.
Yeah.
What's become abundantly clear to me is that we don't have enough information about how our money's been spent, and that the systems that Wellington Water have aren't capable of actually telling us. I do think there is a really big question about whether we just keep. I've just been.
Yeah, it's just that we started the process in open debate and allowed the mover to speak. The mover does need a seconder, so we've just requested from the chair that she allow for the seconder to speak, and she's allowed it. So we'll let it stand at this rest, but no one else can speak for debate.
I will be just brief, but I don't think there's any particular reason why we shouldn't have a more consistent and considered approach to this funding matter. I think that there is money there, enough to actually accelerate the leaks over Christmas with the existing budget. We could send a strong signal that we are prepared to do more funding, but we need certain things to be better established and monitored before we're prepared to do that. I can't explain to the community at the moment what's happening with the water. I just can't explain it. And they ask me why are leaks not fixed, why are leaks popping up again, why they're not coming back, why they're not doing the whole road, why they're having to wait, how they're triaging it. None of that is obvious. We can't explain what's happening to our communities. So actually, from a point of being responsible with money, especially such big money, at a time like this, I think we are wise to actually have a systematic approach. And I think that's what this motion is seeking to achieve. And some big picture thinking with our other councils. That's not even been mentioned. We've talked workforce, but it's not even been really explained how our demand for workforce correlates with other councils who are in the same Wellington Water businesses that we are. So I do urge you to support this. I don't see any harm in us just relying on the $6 million that's still there to accelerate a bit of funding over Christmas as required, and then have a more systematic approach. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to the vote to lay this on the table and go for Councillor Brown's amendment. Nice and easy. Okay, no talking, please. And that has failed, but we love your work, Councillor Brown, and we appreciate the time that you put into this. Now we're going to move back to the substantive. Who would like to have a wee debate? We can debate this. Councillor Calvert.
Could it not? Look, I was explaining to someone before that we know there are improvements in how we engage with Wellington Water and the reporting and all of that. And it's a bit like us driving a car with an oil leak. However, we don't have the money and we don't have the time to go and buy that Ferrari just yet. So we need to fix what we can on that old car. And I think this is exactly what we're saying. We're not saying that we can't improve how the money is spent, but I don't want to be sitting here even in a few months' time when we know we could have fixed just a few more leaks. And I think I can understand that we're going to do a letter of expectations, but that letter of expectations applies for the 24-25 year. So for this we're talking about here now in the current financial year. So I will be, and I just want to say thank you to the Mayor for adding in 5 and 6, because I think that hopefully will give a little bit more comfort to people if they were a bit concerned about whether the reporting on the additional funding. And I hope in February we can actually start looking also depending on our finances, whether we can actually bring forward any capital renewals as well that will actually get to the source of the issue of some of the leaks, if nothing else. So I will be supporting these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else before we go to right of reply? Oh, Councillor Matthews.
Just very briefly, I want to, because we couldn't have the debate on the procedural motion, I do want to acknowledge the work that Councillor Brown has done to date and give my utmost support for it. I think that when it comes to the problem definition here, there is more than one problem when it comes to the delivery of water services, and people have focused on the problem of the money given by Wellington City Council, and I believe there are more substantial problems that we need to fix in addition to making sure that we have the funding to deliver the work that needs to be done. So I do think Wellingtonians deserve better than what they are currently getting. And so that amendment, the procedural motion, I struggled a lot. It took me a long time to cast a vote on that because I agree with everything you say, Councillor Brown, and I give you my full support to the improvement, our organisation getting behind the improvement that is needed, but in the information to support it. Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Just very briefly, the one thing that Wellingtonians care about are the leaks. It's something which everyone in Wellington unites over, and I think if we are seen, no matter what the optics are as important for us as actually the money, and I think we have to give Wellington Water all the help we can so they can plan ahead and get the teams in place so that people can have the showers they want to. But I'd just like to say I have a water meter, so I already make sure I turn the tap off when I clean my teeth.
Very good, Councillor. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, look, sorry. Okay, I've been a bit on the fence around this in terms of whether we go ahead or we authorise these funds. But I think what's framed my thinking as we get into the likelihood of level 4 restrictions is I think back to the COVID response and why were we so allergic and angry as a country when certain cabinet ministers went for bike rides or flouted the restrictions where we were all meant to be in this together, and that was the key feeling that we're all in this together. And for Wellingtonians to read a headline that we haven't stretched ourselves over this period of level 4 restrictions while we're asking them to, if it's brown, flush it down, does not build that social license or that buy-in. Yeah. Doesn't build that social license to have that compliance with water restrictions. You know, we all have to give a bit here, and it's very uncomfortable because we know, again, Councillor Brown is correct in identifying a lot of issues in terms of the relationship and the reporting and all of those things that flow down from there. But we do have to be seen to be responding as well. I do like the approach that this looks like as a suburb by suburb basis. I know that 2 prominent leaks I've had repaired in Johnsonville recently had been, I didn't even intend for it at that time, immediately within 2 or 3 metres other leaks in the vicinity that haven't been attended to. And it's a bit hard to go back to the community and go, hey, that big one that we're all pissed off about has been fixed. Oh, but the one next door they didn't get to. Again, it doesn't buy, I'd respect maybe if we couldn't have a discussion around the table while I'm talking, thanks. Again, it doesn't buy that social license that people need from their council to actually trust the institution. The big thing here is we have a KPI. We actually have a KPI, which seems in itself revolutionary, 880 leaks. So that also is really encouraging. So I can't speak for others around the table, but certainly my appetite in what we do for the LTP and the investment level that we put through is really going to be coloured by the delivery of this project. So again, I'm just going to ask if people could please stop talking while I'm in debate. This is the 3rd time. So yeah, for me, I will look at what they deliver on. Do they hit that KPI? And that can help us with a relationship. But we have a KPI. That in itself is revolutionary. And I think that we need to show Wellingtonians that we're stretching on this one. Thank you.
I'm taking one more person, Councillor Panovich, and then we'll close this off.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I see this as being very reactive situation that we're in just prior to year end. I think it's going to make us all feel very happy going away for Christmas that we've put in some more money. But I think if you look back, we've actually approved money regularly, but we don't know where it went. We don't know what happened. And that seems to be consistent in the trend over many, many periods. So I support Councillor Brown and the work that he's doing, and I support the view that we need a letter of expectation, and I support the view that we actually need some credible metrics to analyse where this money's going, because we know it's going down the drain. Thanks.
Councillor. Okay, we're good. I will not speak any further. I think we should just go straight to a vote. Oh, do we want to take anything separately? It'd be better if we didn't. I mean, it's substantive. Okay, we're going to take everything together. Fabulous. And that has passed. Thank you very much, everyone. We are now going to take a break. So if we could all come back at 22:11, that'd be wonderful. And we're just going to get through everything real quickly. Great.
it's a pleasure to bring this Te Atakura 2023 update report for your consideration. Alison's here to talk to the detail and introduce the report in part. Just wanted to celebrate a couple of big wins. We've got some quite considerable targets for both the city and the council. 57% actually by 2020, and of course between 2020 and 2030, but we have to actually get zero emissions by 2050, which is no mean feat, so we have to keep up the ante here. The city itself reduced its emissions by 10% the last couple of years, and council's emissions have been reduced by 44. Yeah, so pretty good result for the city over the last 3 years. Airport excluded, council free, but in April also, I just want to celebrate we adopted the Community Adaptation Engagement Roadmap. It's quite an important piece of work that helps us think about our most vulnerable communities, the science around what is affecting them from storm surges and flooding, and how we're going to try to address them and help them consider options into the future. So that note, I think I'll get Alison just to summarise the report in general, and then we're happy to take questions.
Kia ora, councillors.
No, keep going.
Sorry. Thanks, Liam. We are making good progress. The report I will take as read. The introduction is probably the easiest part of it to read. We note in the report how much we love this city and that it's at risk from climate change, and that we have a strong strategy to respond, both upstream in keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees and increasing our city's resilience to the impacts that we're already experiencing. It's worth noting how proud I am and how proud we are as officers of how cross-organisational Te Atakura is. This is a team effort and involves many, many different business units across council. In the transport and urban form space, we've made significant progress on our transport networks. The proposed district plan will enable future residents to meet their transport needs with active and public transport. We've installed 14 public chargers to support the 30% of residents who can't park off-street, and we've increased the availability of micro-mobility, e-bikes and e-scooters. I mean, there's nothing like making climate action fun to make it a pleasant experience. We're also supporting communities to take climate action, which I know is important to many councillors. We're supporting communities and small businesses to understand effective climate action, and we're funding grassroots ideas with the Climate and Sustainability Fund. We've launched phase 2 of the Community Engagement Roadmap that Liam referenced around climate adaptation, and working with a variety of local community groups to understand climate change and how they can respond. The results that we've had are really good, particularly in council emissions and out at the landfill, but as Liam articulated, there's still quite a way to go. We also acknowledge in the report that the world has changed quite a lot since Te Atakura was adopted and since the climate and ecological emergency was declared by this council. We've had a pandemic, we've had international conflict, we've had extreme weather events and a rising cost of living. Responding effectively is really complex, as climate change is intertwined with social equity, recognition of the role of mana whenua and the ecological emergency. This is an opportunity as well as a challenge. It gives us an opportunity to solve for multiple challenges at the same time, to make our city more equitable, more dynamic, more joyous for our mokopuna and for those to come. As a final note, the implementation plan that this report reports against is a living document. We are planning a review in the second half of 2024 to better align our strategy to Hakihea and Tupiki Ora, to better connect to social equity, ecological pressures, circular economy aspirations, and to further integrate our approaches between mitigation and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take questions now. Councillor Young.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you mentioned that people are working cross-council. Is this the cross-council steering group that's mentioned in the paper? So who's actually on it? How big is it?
So the strategy reference group has been set up in the last couple of months. It involves several business unit managers, and it's a way for us to keep in touch across the different initiatives because, for example, Transport and Urban Form is handled by the P&E group, but Planning and environment
Yeah,
group.
so planning and environment, property, infrastructure, transport. We've got legal, I think, on there as well as a reference. So
Community
Moana
and
Maki,
engagement.
Yeah, Moana Maki, my chief advisor, sits on the chair, and she steers the initiatives.
Councillor Pennant.
Thank you for all your work. All work is good work. Am I reading it wrong when it says that emissions from on-road transport have gone up, or is that just because of the dip in the COVID year?
No, that's correct.
Okay, well, that's not very good, obviously. Now, I'm curious why you mentioned the Home Energy Saver program and the Environmental Performance Fund. I know it's in place currently, but you've highlighted it and then advised that it should go, both of them.
The report covers the financial year up to 30 June 2023, so it's that financial year, and it covers the activities that were funded in the 2021 LTP. So that's separate to decisions that you might make for the 2024 LTP.
It's just kind of interesting as a historical record. And the last question, which is probably the biggest one, is just really about how confident you are that the council can gear up to really make the changes that need to be made. Like you're saying, we've reduced, but we need to reduce that amount every year to get to those targets, which are urgent.
I think it's important to always keep in mind that this is a city challenge, and local government is one part of the complexity of this challenge. So Te Atakura focuses on what role local government can play in climate change and what actions we can take. Does that kind of make sense?
Well, that doesn't make me confident.
Well, to reach the city target requires communities, neighbourhoods, small businesses, large businesses, infrastructure owners, central government, local government. It requires all of those pieces of the puzzle to be pulling in the same direction. It requires partnership with mana whenua. We are there to support and also to lead on the systems that we have control over, which is transport and urban form.
And we are there, and we are supporting.
And waste.
And it is a stretch target.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that. I think that's what you're saying.
Okay, and that can I have your reassurance that you will continue to emphasise the urgency and the importance of this work, irrespective of what the government does or doesn't do?
Of course, yep.
Councillor McNulty.
At Rex yesterday, we ended up not approving a new EV charging site. It provoked a bit of discussion. So when this paper was around EV chargers when they were first implemented, is it a fair assumption they were limited in availability around Wellington?
They were and they still are. And the motivation for the business case for the public EV chargers is that 30% of Wellingtonians don't have off-street parking. So if they convert to an electric vehicle, they cannot charge that car themselves at their property. And so they will need, it's kind of council is able to take a position of providing the infrastructure to then encourage people to buy electric vehicles. So that those people who still have to drive, and we know that public transport and active transport doesn't reach everyone, that those people who still have to drive are able to use an electric vehicle.
Do you think we may be heading towards a place where the market actually provides for that and council may be superfluous to that?
That could potentially happen, but we haven't seen that happen yet.
Not evidence, okay. And lastly, is it possible to actually run those EV chargers on a profit basis rather than recouping the costs?
Yes.
Okay. I've got one more, but I can come back.
Oh, you can ask it.
Okay, just number 4, I know that we've been told around priorities when we put anything in for projects now, we need to be looking at taking things out. So I just want to understand the ramifications of if we were to use investigator citizens assembly, do we need to be taking things out to put that on the work program?
That amendment, officers are already investigating ways to help communities engage in climate action. I have several members of staff who are already doing that work, and we are already investigating whether citizens' assemblies would be useful in that context. So that wouldn't add any extra work. It refers to work that's already underway.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, kia ora. Can I just go back to the DIA funding for the communication and behaviour change? Can you just remind me, was the funding granted specifically for that? And how much was the funding? I just need
Alison can tell you the total amount, but it was a climate action education was the category, and it was described as a sort of a regional effort to understand how we educate the community. There's been a couple of goes at that, but how much was actually allocated, Alison, on the DIA?
We applied for $3 million in DIA funding under the heading of Climate Action Education, and that money is currently funding a range of activities, including phase 2 of the Climate Adaptation Community Engagement Roadmap. So it funds a couple of staff in the Comms and Engagement team. And
800,000 it says.
Yep. We're also funding practical support for people to take up riding by bike to support the bike network plan. And part of the money was allocated towards a communications effort to make sure that Wellingtonians understand what effective climate action is.
Is there any deadline on when we have to deliver that by?
In our contract, we have agreed to a 30th of June 2024 milestone for spending the money. We may be able to extend that, but we have to get DIA's agreement to extend that timeframe.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Calvert. Apologies.
No, I'll wait. Okay, yeah, great. Just in your projections, have we taken into account the initiatives that we've got underway to reduce emissions? For example, sludge, zero waste. Like, is that all factored in to the gap, for example? Like,
yes. We do have some idea of how much that will reduce emissions. It's significant to council's emissions, not that significant for city emissions because waste is only 7% of city emissions.
Same as air travel though.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's not to say that just because it's a small bit that we don't need to do it because it's net zero by 2050, so you do all of it.
Yeah, great, okay. And just one more question, just in terms of, does that apply as well for things like the proposed MRT? Like, had we factored that into that gap as well, or?
So the modelling we did in 2021, we looked at whether existing policies and settings were going to achieve the 57%. And when we modelled those in addition to our proposed work, including the light rail, that was a 21% reduction, leaving a 36% gap.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, just carrying on from Deputy Mayor Foon's questions, but in terms of redirecting some of that money that was coming from DIA, is that something that, because we as a council approved if we were going to make up where that funding should go from that was available from DIA, should that come back to the council to make a decision on, in terms of if you want to reroute some of that money? Should that not come back to council for us to determine?
The contract we have with DIA says climate action education, and the resolution from memory also says climate action education. The split of funding across the different work streams was in response to a Q&A. So I would have to take Democracy Services advice as to whether that needed to come back. But,
perhaps I could answer that, Councillor Calvert. I don't think, given the level in which it was agreed to, it wouldn't require a change in resolution because it's at a level of detail in terms of where it's actually targeted.
Yeah, it would be.
I think so.
Okay, it would just be interesting just to double check on that. So I just want to understand about the education aspect, because one of the recommendations here is that officers investigate approaches to help our communities engage in climate action, including the use of a citizens' assembly. So, which is really getting feedback to make a plan. So I almost think, is this duplicating what's already being done?
As I said, that resolution wouldn't increase officer workload. We're already doing that investigative work because we have already been planning and executing community engagement.
So why would you do a citizens' assembly on top of that?
Look,
Is that yeah?
Your Worship, I think it's just because we now have run a successful model and it's been reported to council and it's a sort of an arrow in our quiver and we should investigate it. I think that's the intent. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Deputy Mayor, but I'm sure she can talk to that.
So the extra comms people that you've got involved in this work, are they permanent employees or are they on contract?
We don't hire permanent employees when the funding is time bound.
Right.
So they're on fixed term contracts and they're engagement professionals.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora whānau. A couple of days ago, we had from the Chief Financial Officer regards to service cut. So my question is, are you looking at the possibility of cutting that service part of the LTP service cut? If yes, what is the consequence would be? If not, why not?
Not at this stage, Councillor. I think the funding envelope for this team has remained intact. What isn't going to be increased is matched funding that the DIA had given us. So we stay within our fiscal envelope as funded, but the additional money that DIA provided us, that won't be replicated in the subsequent years of the LTP.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. Just a simple question. How many officers or staff members are in the climate action team?
In my business unit, we have about 13 people that are employed doing transport behaviour change work, so practical support for people to change their transport habits. Very little of that is rates funded. That is partly funded by Waka Kotahi, DIA, Better Off funding, surf funding, and Let's Get Wellington Moving funding. So it's a range of funding sources, and those people are mostly on fixed term contracts. And then the other half of the business unit has policy people, research people, community engagement people, and there are about 15 of them.
And just for clarity, Councillor Randall, those engagement people are attached to the actual project. So yesterday's Karori and Newtown Berempore, those teams are attached to those communities and those groups, including schools, helping change the behaviour and use those cycleways we're building. So it's a support framework to the actual asset we're building.
Okay. No, thank you very much.
I'm not seeing any further questions, so thank you both for that. Wonderful. And I will now hand over to Deputy Mayor Foon to move the paper.
Okay, kia ora tātou, and I'm really glad this paper came to our final council meeting. I think it's it's a good way to wrap up the year for those that that really assess that where we're tracking, how we're tracking on our response to the climate emergency. I do want to thank officers for all the mahi that you have done on behalf of this council, on behalf of Wellington City, and behalf of Next Generations. Thank you for the work. And it is great to see the status where we're at now. So we've reduced our city emissions over the last 3 years by 10%. That's a really great outcome. And our council emissions also reduced by 44%, which is, I think, very covetable by many other organisations, although we understand a lot of that is to do with the landfill, but we can see how critical it is. And we need to know that all of the actions that under Te Ata Kura that have come out of this. So we've got Te Anamata Akai o Tō Tātou Tauni, our city's food future. He Anamata Parakore mō Pōneke, a zero waste future for Wellington. Our green network plan, our transport initiatives, the Climate and Sustainability Fund, reaching into communities. All of these initiatives are massive, and you can hear the team that it's taking to do that. But we still have a gap, a projected gap. It is 30% that will require 7% of emissions every year to get to the first total by 2030. And so we've just on an average of 3% now. So that is going to require a lot more mahi. And I think one of the keys to that mahi, apart from all of the opportunities that councillors have looked at, but a big part of that gap is us, everyday people. And that is why that communications plan, behaviour change plan is really important. And I've been keeping my eye on when this is going to land. And so that is why there is an amendment there with a time-bound time-bound request that will come back to council so we can see that. And in the last IPCC report, it says that for mitigation, behaviour change and communications are a really critical part of how people can become part of the climate change solution.
Final points, please, Deputy Mayor.
Has it gone already? Great. Okay. So I think the amendments speak to that, just getting the food futures work reported to in Te Ata Kura, and also, as we heard, the investigate approaches to our communities to engage in climate action. So possible use of a citizens' assembly. But I think one of the ideas that I have had on my bicycle to work this morning was just a fun branding exercise of I am part of Pōneke's climate action. We really need to invite our community into this journey with us. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora. I understand Councillor Pennant is going to second. Would you like to speak now?
Briefly, thank you. So big thanks to officers, huge amounts of work done, and as I say, any work done is good work, and it's a continuation essentially of the work that started in 2007 under a Conservative mayor. So hopefully we can bring everyone together on this particular challenge. But look, we've got so much work to do, and I worry about it when we just talk about climate change in isolation. Whilst there is reference to the biodiversity crisis, we haven't quite got the integration right, and this is kind of where we need to be focusing our work. The system change will be very, very significant, and I don't think people are quite up to that yet. Like, we need to change our lives quite dramatically. And when I say that, it's mostly to the middle classes and the wealthy. It is not to the poor, because the more money you have, the more likely you are to be doing damage to our climate. I do think this is an interesting paper to be getting as we're talking about cutting our mitigation budget. This is kind of a slide to adaptation, but essentially it's a cut because we have to adapt as well as mitigate, and so that just for me doesn't kind of work. And I just finish. Usually I don't agree with Damien Grant, but it really hit me last week when I read his column, and he said, "I don't think some of these people have even read Limits to Growth," and I went, "Holy heck, that is such a good point," because. And if you haven't read it, it's a good read for the summer holidays. Compulsory university reading as part of some of our courses. The whole debate over the last few years over climate change and housing profoundly disturbed me, because essentially it was a kind of a socialist agenda, which I would support. With climate change tacked on, it was not an environmental campaign. An environmental campaign will start from the fact that the world's resources are finite. They are finite, and we have to look at how we use those resources in a more sustainable way, not just going with a growth agenda, which is extremely dangerous. So I think there's still quite a lot more thinking to do as we pull all these documents together to make sure that the philosophical foundation is right, that it is our relationship with nature, the way we use resources, which is the real problem, not climate change. But nevertheless, we are, I think nature will force our hand, which will be positive. There will be more crises, and then we will be forced to act, and that can only be a good thing. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. We now move to debate. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Kaunihera as he has an amendment to put up.
Thank you. I'd like to raise an amendment, the text of which should be with Democracy Services. That's the one. Oh, tēnā tātou. Hey, look, I realise that that our worship member wants to get us out of here by 11:30, so I'll do my best to keep it brief. My amendment simply calls for Wellington City Council to become the first city in Aotearoa to formally endorse the International Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. If you don't know what the treaty is, it is essentially a call that cities around the world have united on to ask that their central governments phase out fossil fuel proliferation, i.e. the digging up of new oil and gas reserves, to bring it down to a zero figure in as short a time as possible. If adopted, we would be joining 75 other major cities, including several capitals around the world of international renown, who have signed on to this call, and also 1,800 organisations, 101 Nobel laureates, 570 plus parliamentarians, and 3,000 academics who have also echoed that call. So we are in very good company, I would say. I would say with regard to our own organisation, this call builds on and reflects our work on projects like the fossil-free CBD, on projects like Te Atakura, hence why it is raised an amendment to this paper, and the whole breadth of our climate action, which we've been studiously undertaking under the shepherdship of several councils so far. Finally, it sends that strong signal to our central government that fossil fuel proliferation is a thing of the past, an ideology of the past, and that limitless growth is simply impossible. So I'll hand over to the Mayor, who will second this, but I encourage you to support this amendment today. Tēnā.
I will second this. I believe Councillor Kaunihera has said it all, and I will leave it at that. Councillor Young. Oh,
We could have officer advice.
yes, absolutely. Can we have officer advice on this amendment and what impact it might have?
What's the exact question? Whether this has an impact on us? Officer advice is that there is nothing that would stop the council from endorsing the treaty.
No, the question is, do officers support this amendment?
Officers do not support or not support amendments. Like, that's not what we do, as I think our CE was gamely hopping on the microphone to say. So I give you advice as to how it would impact council or how it would impact what you would do. I'm not here to have a political opinion on the treaty.
Okay, lots of hands up, so I am just going to go to Councillor McNulty.
Do you know what the position of the treaty is on nuclear energies?
No. Councillor Kaunihera, do you know the answer?
Right of reply.
Sure.
Councillor Calvert.
So do you know what the impacts of us, if this council agreed to endorse this treaty, what the impacts on our council would be?
Yes, we looked at that, and I also sought advice from the legal team, and there are no impacts on us as a council. We don't own oil and gas infrastructure, nor is there any oil and gas infrastructure within our boundary.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter one way or the other, by the sounds of it? It's just, yeah.
I don't have an officer opinion on that.
Okay, so so my other question, which might not be for you, Alison, but probably if this council voted for this, but essentially the council hadn't actually read the treaty that they were endorsing, would that impact on this decision? The validity of this decision?
My advice through you, Mayor, is that it is entirely your choice as to whether you wish to endorse the intent of the treaty or not. This is not a matter under the Local Government Act that officers are giving advice on. In terms of the content, it is actually, I think, a political decision.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any further. Oh, Councillor Free.
So our auditor, one of the matters in which we're qualified at the moment or emphasised is that we can't actually account for some of the things that we want to do in the climate space. We can't actually account for the effect. Yeah, would this add to that complexity?
No.
Okay.
Right. We move back to debate. Would anyone like to have a go? Yes. Yep. Councillor Pennant. Councillor Calvert.
Well, I'd like to. I was pleased that Councillor Pennant quoted the Damien Grant article from earlier because his headline was. There seems to be more people interested in performative theatre than environmental issues, and I think this is a prime example of this. I would challenge. I wonder how many people would have, if you're going to vote for this, how many people have actually read the treaty? I know I haven't. Given when this amendment came through, so if you have read the. This treaty, then obviously I'm very impressed, and you have, I think you have a right to vote. Yes, I know. It's Christmas, so.
Let Councillor speak.
I know. Point of order, anyway, Councillor Matthews. I think that was inappropriate comment to make because there was no comment about democracy. So thank you.
Take team.
I can about somebody interrupting me, which is not appropriate. But I'll take it in the spirit of Christmas. Look, I just really think this is probably, dare I say it, virtue signalling. It sounds great. What does it actually mean for our council? We've got bigger issues to worry about, like the water leaks. And if it makes people feel good about proving this, that's fine. But again, I think it's just more performance antics. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pennant?
Right. I won't do your right of reply, Councillor Winera. I'd like to thank the young Pacifica and Māori leaders who came and presented this because it was absolutely appropriate. There's probably nothing more morally outrageous than rich countries polluting and making homeless people in the poorest countries on the planet. And that's why I came to environmentalism, actually. It's not about electric cars and that sort of thing. It is in reducing your waste a bit. It's actually about making sure that everyone now and in the future has a safe place to live on this planet. So it's absolutely appropriate. It is not performative. And thank you, Councillor Winera, for actually putting this in the right place because you wanted to put it in another document. This follows on from the declaration of the climate and ecological emergency that was passed in 2019. So this builds on it and it makes it stronger. That framework has been used repeatedly by officers over the last 4 years, which has been incredibly helpful to say, look, there is an emergency here and we need to act urgently. So this absolutely can help us frame our work going forward because we might not have any exploration activities here, but we use it, don't we, to power cars and the planes and our homes. So, I would see this as a useful challenge to us as a city to further reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. They are nothing less than completely dangerous to burn. We cannot continue to do it. We've got to go to non-renewables as quickly as possible.
I finished with, I just read on the BBC, a wonderful Generation Alpha. They're getting younger. A 12-year-old coming on to the stage at COP23 and saying, stop it. Dragged off by security, but at least got a round of applause because that's the kind of leadership we need. So thank you, Councillor Kaunihera, again for being part of that leadership, which is not virtue signalling, but is an essential shift that we need to make.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further debate before we head? Yes, Councillor Free.
I am going to stand because it is council. I did think about not supporting this, but in actual fact, I think it should be supported. It is just about the cutting down on the numbers of new fossil fuel sources. You know, not actually considering going out into the Cook Strait as was mooted a few years ago and mining for oil out there where the environment's really not suitable and we could be at a major risk of an oil spill. I think that in my time, it's a long time ago, I was very much an activist for the nuclear-free movement. In fact, they called it the Sarah-free movement at Canterbury University because it was what I was... It was my thing, and that just shows how old I am because that was a thing back in the 1970s, and we've forgotten how scared we all were about nuclear war, petrified about it. It's probably still a real threat, but now we've got even other sorts of threats. And I think sometimes actually you do need to make a stand. This may not make a huge difference, but it's not going to hurt. So I'm going to support it. I think the people who've come to remind us of our responsibilities. I challenge us all really to think about our personal lives. You know, there's more we can do, and even if it's small things, there's more we can do to avoid buying things at Christmas that create waste, and you know, driving unnecessarily if there are other things we can do, and being more efficient with the trips that we do make. It's all about small changes, but they add up to large changes on a big enough scale.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
So I'm not going to support this. I think this is really not the business of this council to get involved with what is really a national political issue. However, I also want to point out that these sort of moves do have consequences when they're followed through with support. I want to remind everybody that the fossil fuel growth that's happening throughout the world is not happening in the developed world. It's happening in the third world and the second world. It's happening in places like India, which is one of the largest coal consumers in the world, yet per head of population they only consume half the amount of coal that the Western world does. I want to remind people, from that around 3 billion people, nearly half the population, don't have access to clean cooking. They're using wood and charcoal and dung cakes, and they need electricity, cheap electricity. Every year, almost 4 million people, according to Forbes, die from household air pollution, mostly from bad cooking air. So banning fossil fuels, in my opinion, is really a short-term. It reminds me of a good quote, I think, which is, for every complex problem, there's a simple solution that does not work. And I ask you to think again that this straightforward, ban this, ban that, as if it's going to change the world, when you really need to think about having a plan that's going to help those in need as a priority, is really the way we ought to go. And this is also a national government point of view, which the City Council does not need to get involved with. So I do urge you, but my fellow councillors, to vote against this amendment for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brown.
Well, initially I was opposed to this sort of dumping a last-minute amendment, but I've listened to the debate and I've actually decided I will support it. And I think Sarah's point is the right one. It's a symbolic gesture on our part, but I think it's quite an important symbolic gesture, But it was also because this is obviously the right side of history, isn't it? So if you vote against this, you are basically voting for a very backward-looking recidivist attitude. So I think the youngest member of the council has put it forward, and I'm happy to back youth.
You continue to surprise me, Councillor Brown. Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's right. Let's settle. I'm not seeing any further debate, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Wineta.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, yeah, look, a couple of things. I appreciate all those points. Just with regard to a question that was asked of myself with regard to nuclear energy, the organisation supports. Oh, correction. A part of the fossil fuel non-proliferation movement is a move to a fair energy transition, which I assume means climate-friendly energy sources in whatever form that may take for countries that might be on less of a fault line than we are. But yeah, so whilst it's not explicitly called out, that's in there. Some other questions raised around the text of the treaty. So everyone did get a copy of the website. You can find that in your emails if you're curious. The treaty itself is not a literal treaty. It's a movement by cities around the world to create a document onto which governments of the world can sign on and endorse the idea that fossil fuels are not to be proliferated. There's a bit of talk as well about whether this is indeed the role of council. And first of all, I would ask you that if you hold that belief, then you possibly ought to write emails to the 75 other major cities, including rather prestigious capitals who do not share that opinion, and see if you can convince them. But in the words of Councillor Pannett, this really is cultural shift. This is what cultural shift looks like. Creating an untenable position in the advocacy of fossil fuel proliferation is what climate action is all about. It is the herald of an existential crisis that we continue to drill for oil and gas in a climate that is, and an ecosystem that is collapsing. And to make that position more and more untenable as years go by, using mechanisms that are available to us, such as this, is what cultural shift looks like. That's how the change happens. So that when we finally do get around to banning oil and gas, it feels like something that was a long time coming. And politicians feel they have the permission and the social license to vote in favour of measures such as that. That's all I'll close with. I encourage you to support this. Thank you very much. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you, Councillor. Let's move to a vote. Councillor O'Neill, we're just waiting for your vote. She may have stepped away, so let's just... No? There we go. That's a yes. And that has passed. Thank you very much. We now move back to the substantive. Councillor Matthews.
Just very briefly, despite that great agreement we just had, Councillor Pannett, I can't let that go unresponded to. First of all, just to, strongly support the work here, but well documented, the most effective climate change mitigation strategy is building dense infill housing in existing neighbourhoods. But I look forward to coming back to this conversation in the new year, my friend.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further hands. Yes, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, actually, there's one aspect of this amendment which I really strongly support, so I will be voting in favour of it, which is that the issues put to the Citizens' Assembly. I think this is the right sort of issue for the Citizens' Assembly to consider, because after all, there are costs and benefits out of different initiatives. I mean, I do feel that some of the reporting that we get is a bit short in terms of the costs. It tends to show the benefits, and that's fine. I mean, there's obviously a lot of benefits we are delivering, but I would like to know a bit more about the expense. But I think the Citizens Assembly are very well equipped to deal with an issue of this particular more focused nature, as opposed to the LTP, which I felt they kind of got swamped them to some extent. So I'll be voting in favour of it, primarily because of the Citizens Assembly point.
Great, thank you. Right of reply?
Going to take on Councillor Winiera's kaupapa and stand for the last council meeting. So yeah, just on the last amendment, a big thanks to Tiana, Mary and Councillor Winiera. And it is wonderful to be bringing the International Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty into the council. Great website. Amazing, and actually council's doing a lot of work in that space, and so it's really great to see it aligned to grander kaupapa. I also just want to take a moment to thank all the councillors in 2019 who moved the climate and ecological emergency. Councillor Pannett, Councillor Free, were you there for that? Yes, thank you. Thank you. It is that work that breeds new councillors like me, for better or for worse. And I've been carrying this document around like a little council Bible to say, right, what are we doing and how are we tracking? So this report is very important to me today. And it is my dream, and the reason why I get out of bed and rush to work every morning is, although the mayor is awesome, it is a greater kaupapa that we align on, that Pōneke, together with our mana whenua partners, will be a leader, a global leader in climate action, demonstrating leadership as a sustainable city for our future generations. Kia ora. I ask you to support the amendments.
Deputy Mayor. We will now take it to a vote. Would anyone like to take anything separately? And then the rest? Yep. So we're just voting for number 1. Great, that has passed, and we're now voting for 2 to 5. I need new batteries. Narrow it in. And that has passed. Thank you. 2.3, Actions Tracking and Forward Program. Please welcome Stephen to introduce the report. That's after this.
Morena councillors. This is a fairly straightforward report as normal. Just picking up on one of the questions in the Q&A about there didn't seem to be much on the forward agenda for council. I'm sure by the time we get there will be other items. And actually through February, March, April, a lot of the work's actually done through Councillor Matthews' committee. So that's probably really the reason why it's we're trying to keep things relatively free to enable all of that mahi to be done.
Any questions? Councillor Pennant.
Sorry, there are a few today. I'll start with 3. When are we getting the updated action tracking document? Because it is just really difficult to read.
So there are quite a few changes planned for the new year in terms of how we communicate this information to the public, but also to councillors. And I'm actually happy to run a bit of a drop-in to explain that to the wider councillors early in the new year. We've actually got a session particularly with Councillor Randall, but we're welcome to broaden that out so that you can see what's planned.
Look, it might be a question to take it offline, but I think it's worthwhile raising publicly. This around the lease of the Mount Victoria Bowling Club. and they're saying that they might only be able to afford to strengthen to 40%. Are we going to take a general sort of policy position on this? Now, we can't have a policy under law, but, you know, at least some guidelines.
I'm probably not the best person to answer that, whether Siobhan or James, or perhaps take it offline.
Yeah, maybe do that. And the city activation project, I do want to ask some questions about that, so just seek guidance from the chair about how that's handled appropriately.
Because that's a public excluded matter, that wouldn't be appropriate to answer it in this forum.
So could we ask when we go into PE later? Because it is a relevant item for this meeting.
It's kind of not on the agenda, but...
No, well, the status of it is on the agenda, so that's just why I think it would be helpful.
I'll get some advice on that,
okay,
Councillor.
Thank you.
Was that your last question? Oh, cool. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Stephen. I'm not sure if it's under this committee, but you can correct me. Regardless to the affordable sports review, where is that up to? And I don't see it somewhere here.
I think that question was answered through the Q&As, Councillor. But James, are you able to throw some more light on that? It is in the Q&As, Councillor.
I'm afraid I don't have any more information than what's in the Q&A, Councillor, but if you want more information, I can certainly take that offline.
I mean, if you can just tell us now what is in the Q&A, maybe.
Sorry, could you repeat?
If you can just tell us what is already answered in the question and answers. What is already in the Q&A, if you can just tell us now.
Can we come back to this, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll look it up. Yep.
Cool. Councillor Randall.
So this is actually a question which I think is related to Councillor Pannett's question, but it's actually about the action to go into public excluded on the 4th of October meeting. There's an action item there on page 94, action item 2, and I just want to read it out. That it direct officers to consider the release of the publicly excluded information in this report by November the 30th of November 2023. That action is shown as complete. So my question is, what is the officer advice that was provided, and to whom was that advice given?
Matter we need to discuss in PX.
Yeah. So, and we're also connected to Councillor Pannett's question. We'll just get some advice in a tick and likely bring it to PX, which is our final item. Councillor Calvert, and then Councillor Free.
Yeah, it carries on from that same thing. Given that and the famous Code of Conduct report that was released last week and that was made available publicly, and given that officers agreed there was nothing confidential in it, in terms of any information about the city activation program, and there is stuff in there specifically about the city activation project, I wonder how much should be in public excluded and what should be in public now.
Is there a question?
Can you articulate the question again? Yep. Right.
In the Code of Conduct report, it specifically refers to the city activation, and it specifically refers to information about the deal. And that was released under the guidance of your Chief of Staff, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, and the Council's Chief Counsel.
Through you, Mayor, we can give advice in the public excluded part of this meeting. I will note that contents from the Code of Conduct report were released to members of the media before the council staff advise the Mayor on the release of that document.
But it's now public, and that's the thing.
Indeed, but I think the argument is probably a flawed one, Councillor Calvert, and we can give you advice.
But no one's come back to tell us that?
We can give you advice in the public excluded part of this meeting.
I think it's quite good if we can get some advice offline, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll have some people go away about this bigger issue, so the city activation and code of conduct stuff. So we've heard your questions in 3 different ways. So take that away. Do we have any other questions about? Yeah.
My question is just on the development contributions policy. It's in progress, but it would have a bearing, I would think, on our LTP discussions. How is that progressing, and what's the updated plan for us getting it back?
That comes back through Councillor Matthews' committee next year.
Is there a time frame for us? Because I think it's pretty important. We've talked and talked and talked about reviewing that development contributions policy.
I think until the council's actually made decisions on the actual capital program and the projects that are in, that really determines how that policy gets applied. But we will be updating the council, I think, is it February next year, Andrea?
February. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this? Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Now I can see on the question answer regards to the affordable sport. My question to you, Stephen, is in that case, at end of January, that is when you're coming back to us about the service cuts and what we will be doing, what we are not doing. And that's when we will be discussing with the mayor as well, our priorities. So if it is coming at the end, how are we going to include that report and the funding that is required into that discussion?
I think it's an iterative process in the end, and there is the ability later on in the process to address that. But I think James has left the room. But sometimes the timing doesn't actually align, in the perfect world. But there is the opportunity through our process to address that.
May I request if we can include that in mind, the Chief Financial Officer to include what is required for the funding?
I think
the report is not going to come back before then.
I think through you, Mayor, we're kind of getting into the debate around those topics, whereas this is really just a report on the update in terms of where things are at, and all of those things are yet to come back. So probably not appropriate to kind of go down that line.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pennant.
Sorry, just for absolute clarity, we will have the advice on whether this is in PE or not publicly, because my concern is I did exactly the same thing, got pinged for a code of conduct, and now the organisation is saying that the information could be released. So it's really, really, really important that this is transparent and clear.
We've got Beth here, so she's going to talk about it now.
Because the report has gone out. People can see it.
Kia ora, councillors. So the advice that I gave a number of councillors last week is the advice I stand by, and that is that the Code of Conduct review that was released by Ms Clark does not go any further than the information that was already in the public domain. Right? The matter is still in public excluded. It has not been resolved or determined by the CE to take it out of public excluded. This was advice that was provided by my colleague Phil Becker last day or so. So therefore, any information that is not already in the public domain needs to stay in private. That is the advice.
Councillor Pennant.
So there's 2 questions, and look, this is subject now to probably to external agencies. I was told by the Mayor that the CE had given some lines about what could be said publicly, so it had already gone into the public domain and was no longer confidential. So I just wanted a response to that. But there is significant detail in that report by Ms Clark. So I guess the question is, why are we even having a conversation about whether it's PE or not? It's got all the information in it. So I don't understand your advice. I find it confusing. And the problem has been, is that
I think we've gone completely off track here.
No,
we have, Councillor.
No.
You've received some legal advice, and I'm ending this conversation.
That's not.
And we can discuss things further in PX, because we've heard, actually, this is a PX matter. Yes, it is. I'm going to trust the advice of our legal team, and I'm going to move on. Okay. I will move this program. Yes, second. Any debate? Councillor Pennant.
Really briefly, on principle, I'm going to vote against it because I am concerned about the matter that we've just discussed, that apparently we're going to talk into PX. It's just not good process. And look, I really look forward to seeing the revised formatting for this, because it's very confusing. It's not clear why some items are in there for over a year. We often don't get a status update on where things are at. So I know this was just a first iteration, but it does need a lot of improvement so that we can be really accountable about where we have delivered and where we haven't. Kia ora.
Thank you. Anything else? No. No right of reply. Let's put this to a vote. And Councillor O'Neill. We're going to close it. And that has passed. Okay, we now move to committee reports. Report of the Social, Cultural and Economic Committee meeting. I'm going to take this report as read. It doesn't look like Councillor O'Neill is available, so Councillor Abdurrahman, as the Deputy Chair, would you like to move this? Fantastic. Would you like to speak? No? Would anyone like to speak? I'll second. I also won't speak. Do we have any debate? Fabulous. Let's go to a vote. Oh, yep.
So, James, I want to note last time when we voted in this paper regards to the new town projects, the library, the toilet and the bowling club. And it seems the understanding after that meeting, I had a different understanding when I voted. So I hope that to be looked at it when that get implemented, as I highlighted in my email conversation with you.
I think that was his right of reply.
Yeah,
so we'll
right
just,
of reply.
We'll just
I'm
move
not
on.
just asking you, but yeah.
Thank you. Let's go to a vote. We'll close it. And that has passed. Thank you. We now move to the Regs Committee. I'll take the report as read.
I did have a question following on from the answer given to me in the Q&A. Can I ask it now?
Yeah, for this paper?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. Just look, and it's partly a point of principle too. It seemed that the officers had written to mana whenua, but there hadn't been an answer, and I just want to make it. Actually, I don't know if Karapa, you can help me here. I just want to make it as a point of principle that where we're talking about land and leasing, that we just need to be super cautious. So, can you just talk a bit further? If we send a letter, is that enough really to fulfil our obligations?
In general, principle is that we engage the mana whenua outside of the kind of formal process. The formal process is in parallel with that. So there were conversations outside of the formal letter. The letter wasn't responded to, is how I understand in this space. That doesn't mean we haven't had conversations though.
And so they were basically okay with it?
I wasn't in the conversation, so I don't know if they were okay with it, but...
Yeah. So is it possible to, and I know, appreciate this goes across the council, but it would just, I think, and I know there's capacity issues and all the rest of it, but it would be good if we had and we will need to support to have a definite answer, because I'm just get a bit worried. So the lease for this cycling club, it's in the Q&A question. So a letter was sent to Mana Whenua, and I asked, well, what did they say and whether they'd agreed with it. So it is a general point as well. But maybe this can be taken offline.
I'd assume that the Mana Whenua Pauiwi who on the committee would raise that if it was an issue, but if they haven't, that's fine. But that's how I'd suggest their approach is taken.
Okay, thanks.
Great. No further questions. Yes, Councillor Free.
I'll just briefly introduce or speak to this. So this came to the Regs Committee, and because it is a new lease on Town Belt land, it does need to be approved by council. It might be a new lease, but the club has actually been in existence since 1926. So this is formalising more than an existing arrangement, more than a brand new lease. They are located up by the velodrome on the Haitaito side of the Town Belt. The club has very small club rooms there that they use just for teas and coffees. It's a pretty active club. It's got several hundred members. It's sponsored some rising stars in road and track cycling. There's been a few not world champions, but people who've competed successfully on the world stage who've gone through that club, and it's got a great family atmosphere. So I think this is a lease which is good to formalise. It's good to acknowledge the club's been there. They also donated money and labour to help resurface the velodromes some years ago. So I do commend this, and we did have two Pauiwi members. Holden was there, and he didn't raise any objections whatsoever. We voted for this unanimously at Regs, and very happy to bring it to you today.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you have a seconder?
Well, maybe Councillor Newridden or Councillor Calvert, one of the ones on the committee.
Great. Would you like to speak? Any debate? Right a reply? Cool, let's go to a vote. Deputy Mayor? Councillor Pennant? And that has passed. Thank you. Grants Subcommittee will take the report as read. Do we have any questions for officers? No. Councillor Young, would you like to move?
I would like to move it. I'd just like to say two things. First of all, the allocation of money to the Downtown City Ministry, it's just bringing it into line with the 3-year cycle that other 3-year multi-year contracts are on. So it's just a calendar movement, basically. The second thing is, I just would like to say, we've given some fantastic grants to a whole lot of organisations, and we have some wonderful people in our arts team. And the other night, I went to see Grace Hoti in Secret Lives of Old People at Circa Theatre. She has a wonderful voice, fantastic actress, and we're very lucky to have people like that in our arts team. Great pleasure in moving this paper.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Juanita, would you like to second? Would you like to speak? Great. Any debate? Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment, and that is that I think the work we do in this area is incredibly important, and I realise that there is obviously going to be stresses and strains on the finances, especially with people throwing money at water. But I really, really hope that going forward and in the LTP we can maintain in real terms, at least inflation adjusted, this sort of funding, because it makes a colossal difference to the activation of our city in all sorts of ways. So I think the team here do a great job. I think this is really important work, and I think it's of enormous benefit to our community.
Agreed. Thank you, Councillor. Let's go to a vote. And that is passed. Wonderful. Okay, we are almost there. We now are getting to the public excluded section. Officers recommend that public is excluded from the following part of the proceedings of this meeting. I will move the motion. Deputy Mayor, will you second? Wonderful. Is there any debate? Councillor Pennant.
Sorry, am I able just to ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. So, look, I'm going to vote for this, but can you just pull that up? What kind of information will be released and when? I do have a bit of a concern about a media article.
Can you clarify in terms?
Well, I'll tell you.
I would suggest your question is best asked in PE, because this is an item that is already within PE through the Audit and Risk Committee agenda.
That's fine. So, but just in public, what information will be released and when around this?
Filling any officers in the room if they'd like to give advice. Otherwise, this was actually pulled from the Audit and Risk Committee, which had a release clause in it, which was direct officers to consider the release of the public excluded information when commercial negotiations are complete. So the same would apply here.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I just want to challenge that, and that's why in concerns about this going to public excluded, because in public, which we have released, there's a report out there that's been shared publicly on the basis of advice from officers that council was proposing to buy the land under the Reading Cinema and lease it back to the company. Reading International would use the funds to develop the site. The proposed purchase price was $32 million, with the sale being funded by debt. So I don't see why anything around that. The other thing was council staff have already been negotiating this proposal. So that stuff is public. It's been approved to be public.
So, what we're going to public excluded for is for te kāinga.
Yeah. You said about this other aspect.
But this is for...
yeah, but what I'm trying to say is this stuff is in public, and yet we were told that we couldn't talk about it until this part of the agenda.
Can I just say through the Mayor, the item on the agenda is the matter that was before the Audit and Risk Committee. The other matter you are raising is a separate matter, and one that I will speak to after this meeting.
Anything further? Councillor Randall.
Yes, I just want to note that I support going to public excluded for the Audit and Risk Committee. Of course, it needs to be dealt with appropriately as officers recommend. In terms of the other matter, I don't agree that could be discussed, because we were actually discussing an action item that was done in the motion to go into public excluded, which is itself public. And so, but I do expect on both items that during our discussions we will agree on what information can be released publicly after the meeting, and hopefully that will give the public reassurance that what can be made public is always going to try and be made public. Thank you.
Cool. I think we're ready to go to a vote for public excluded. Yep, we'll close it. And thank you very much. We'll just give it a minute. Just give me a second. Cool. Look, all I really want to say is a huge thank you to our DEM services team, Jennifer, Elise, Sean, Steph, Tian, Letitia, Marcella and Nina, for all of your mahi and keeping all of this together. This is no easy task, so just a round of applause for our DEM services team.
Best of luck to Elise too.
Best of luck to our...
Congratulations coming.
And look, my message to councillors, I know it's been a tough year and I know we've had some public spats and I know my personal life has been on the front page several times now, but look, if I can get through all that rubbish, you all can too. We can work together as a team. I think we're in desperate need of a holiday. Let's come back in the new year refreshed and keep working hard for our people, which is what we do. Kia ora. Now, karakia. Unuhia, nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara, koia rā e runga, iri ake ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. No, I need one more. Cool. Thanks, John. Bye,
Yay.
John.